What would you do if a police officer pointed a gun at you, even though your only mistake was taking the wrong road home? And what if that officer had no idea you were the man trusted to protect the governor's life every single day? Take a moment and imagine yourself in that situation. A quiet highway before sunrise. Hardly any traffic. A peaceful drive that should have lasted only a few more minutes. Then, without warning, flashing red and blue lights appear in your mirror. Within seconds, an ordinary morning turns into a moment that no one standing there will ever forget. It was just after 6 o'clock when a black SUV rolled along a two-lane highway outside the city. Behind the wheel was Marcus Cole, a calm, middle-aged black man wearing a navy jacket over a plain white shirt. He looked like any other person driving to work. There were no government plates, no flashing lights, and nothing about the SUV that attracted attention. Marcus enjoyed quiet mornings. He always left early because he believed rushing caused people to make careless decisions. The radio was off. His phone rested in the center console. His eyes stayed focused on the road ahead. Then bright police lights suddenly filled his rearview mirror. Marcus glanced at the speedometer. He wasn't speeding. He hadn't crossed the center line. He hadn't ignored any traffic signs. Still, he calmly switched on his turn signal and pulled onto the shoulder. As the SUV came to a stop, Marcus lowered his window and placed both hands on the steering wheel where they could easily be seen. Far behind him, a police cruiser stopped. The driver's door opened. Officer Daniel Harris stepped out with quick, confident steps. His face looked tense. His eyes never left Marcus. Something about the driver had already convinced him that this stop was going to be different. Passing drivers slowed down as they noticed the patrol car. A delivery truck pulled into a nearby rest area. Two travelers walking their dog stopped to watch from a safe distance. Nobody knew why the stop had happened. They only knew that the officer looked unusually serious. Officer Harris walked to the driver's window but didn't greet Marcus. Instead, his first words were sharp. "Keep your hands exactly where they are." Marcus gave a small nod. "They'll stay right here, officer." "License and registration." Marcus spoke carefully. "I'll reach for my wallet slowly." "Don't move yet." Marcus immediately stopped. He didn't argue. He didn't complain. He simply waited. That quiet obedience should have lowered the tension. Instead, it seemed to make Officer Harris even more suspicious. The officer studied Marcus for several long seconds before speaking again. "Where are you coming from?" "Home." "And where are you going?" "To work." "What kind of work?" Marcus smiled politely. "I help keep people safe." The answer sounded simple. But it wasn't the answer Officer Harris expected. "What does that mean?" he asked. Marcus paused for just a moment. "I'll gladly explain after I show you my identification." The officer narrowed his eyes. "No." That single word changed everything. For the first time, Marcus realized this wasn't going to be an ordinary traffic stop. He remained calm, but something in the officer's voice suggested the situation was becoming more serious by the second. Then a loud message came through the officer's radio. The officer listened carefully. His expression changed instantly. Without saying another word, he stepped back from the SUV, placed one hand on his service weapon, and shouted loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Driver, don't move." The peaceful morning disappeared in an instant. No one watching from the roadside understood what had just happened. But Marcus looked straight ahead, took one slow breath, and quietly whispered to himself, "I hope this doesn't become the biggest mistake of his career." Marcus didn't move. His hands remained exactly where they were, resting on the steering wheel. His breathing stayed slow and steady, even as Officer Harris stepped farther back from the SUV with one hand firmly gripping his service weapon. The few people watching from the roadside exchanged nervous looks. "What just happened?" one man whispered. "I don't know," another replied. "But that driver hasn't done anything." The silence felt heavy. Even the wind seemed to disappear. Officer Harris raised his voice again. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Marcus nodded. "They haven't moved, officer." His calm answer should have eased the tension. Instead, it seemed to make the officer even more uncomfortable. People who had something to hide usually argued. Some became angry. Others tried to explain everything at once. Marcus did none of those things. He simply waited. That patience made the officer wonder if the driver knew something he didn't. The radio crackled again. "Unit 12, be advised." The message suddenly broke apart in loud static. Only a few words could be understood. "Black SUV. Possible security concern. Verify. The rest disappeared. Officer Harris frowned. He never heard the full message. Instead of asking dispatch to repeat it, he made a decision on his own. Driver. Yes, officer. Slowly step out of the vehicle. Marcus spoke carefully. I will. Before I move, may I tell you where my identification is? No talking. Marcus quietly nodded. Understood. Very slowly, he opened the driver's door and stepped onto the shoulder. His hands remained visible. His movements were slow, controlled, professional. Officer Harris watched every step. Then something caught his attention. Near Marcus's jacket was a small black earpiece. It looked unusual. Not expensive. Not flashy. Just professional. What is that? The officer demanded. Marcus looked toward him. My communication device. What kind of communication device? Marcus answered honestly. For work. What work? Marcus hesitated for only a second. I'll explain as soon as you allow me. Officer Harris wasn't satisfied. His mind had already started connecting pieces that didn't belong together. Black SUV. Communication earpiece. Calm behavior. Short answers. To him, it didn't look normal. To Marcus, it was simply another workday. A second patrol car pulled onto the shoulder. A younger deputy stepped out and quickly walked over. He looked from Marcus to Officer Harris. What do we have? Officer Harris answered without taking his eyes off Marcus. Possible high-risk stop. The deputy studied Marcus for a few seconds. The driver wasn't sweating, wasn't shaking, wasn't trying to leave. Everything about him seemed unusually controlled. The deputy lowered his voice. Did dispatch confirm who he is? Officer Harris shook his head. Not yet. Maybe we should wait. We don't have time. Marcus listened without interrupting. Then he quietly asked, Officer, may I ask one question? Officer Harris didn't answer immediately. Marcus continued anyway. Has dispatch given you my full name? The question caught both officers by surprise. For a brief second, neither of them spoke. Finally, Officer Harris answered. That's none of your concern. Marcus lowered his eyes for a moment. I was hoping you'd say yes. The deputy looked confused. Why would that matter? Marcus looked at him with the same calm expression. Because if they had. He paused. This traffic stop would already be over. Before anyone could respond, dispatch came back over the radio. This time the operator's voice sounded urgent. Unit 12, confirm the driver's identity immediately. Officer Harris reached for the radio. But before he could answer, a single black SUV turned off the highway nearly half a mile away. It wasn't speeding. It wasn't using flashing lights. Yet somehow, Marcus smiled for the very first time that morning. Someone was coming. And whoever it was, already knew exactly where he was. Marcus kept his eyes on the road ahead. He didn't turn around. He didn't try to see who was arriving. The small smile on his face disappeared as quickly as it had come. He knew one thing better than anyone else. When tension is already high, even the smallest movement can make the situation worse. Officer Harris noticed the smile immediately. What are you smiling about? He demanded. Marcus answered calmly. Nothing, officer. It didn't look like nothing. Marcus took a slow breath. I just think this misunderstanding won't last much longer. Those words only made Officer Harris more suspicious. You sound pretty confident. I'm simply being honest. The younger deputy watched Marcus carefully. The more he listened, the less this man sounded like a criminal. His answers were respectful. His movements were careful. And he hadn't ignored a single instruction. Something didn't fit. The deputy quietly stepped closer to Officer Harris. I really think we should verify his identity before we go any further. Officer Harris kept his eyes on Marcus. We already have enough reason to keep investigating. But we don't know who he is. We're about to. Marcus remained silent. He knew arguing would solve nothing. Far down the highway, the black SUV continued moving closer. It wasn't speeding. It wasn't trying to get attention. It simply stayed in its lane, closing the distance 1 mile at a time. Officer Harris looked back at Marcus. Open the rear door of your SUV. Marcus nodded. I can do that. Slowly. Marcus carefully reached into his pocket. The officer immediately shouted. Stop. Marcus froze. My key fob, he explained. The doors are locked. For several long seconds, nobody moved. The deputy looked at Marcus. Then at the officer. He told you what he was reaching for. Officer Harris didn't answer. His attention remained fixed on Marcus. Finally, Marcus slowly removed the key fob with 2 fingers. There it is, he said quietly. The officer gave a short nod. Unlock the vehicle. A soft click echoed through the morning air. The deputy carefully opened the rear passenger door. He looked inside. There were no bags filled with cash. No weapons lying on the seats. No suspicious packages. Everything inside looked perfectly organized. A neatly folded suit jacket. A first aid kit. A laptop case. A small locked equipment box secured to the floor. The deputy frowned. That's it? Officer Harris walked over. What about the box? Marcus answered honestly. It's government-issued equipment. The officer looked back at him. Government? Yes. What department? Marcus gave the same calm reply he had given from the beginning. I'll gladly explain after you verify my identification. Officer Harris sighed impatiently. You keep saying that. Because it's the truth. The officer walked around the SUV one more time, looking for anything that supported his suspicions. He found nothing. Not a broken window. Not fake license plates. Not stolen property. Nothing. The silence became uncomfortable. Even the people watching from the roadside began whispering. If they haven't found anything, why is this still happening? The deputy quietly spoke again. Dispatch is asking for his full name. Officer Harris finally looked at Marcus. State your full name. Marcus answered without hesitation. Marcus Elijah Cole. The deputy immediately repeated it over the radio. For a few seconds. Nothing came back. Then dispatch suddenly responded. Unit 12. The operator paused. Her voice sounded completely different now. Repeat that name. The deputy repeated it. Another long silence followed. Then the operator spoke again, this time slowly, as if choosing every word carefully. Unit 12, do not take any further action until your supervising captain arrives. Officer Harris frowned. Why? Dispatch didn't answer the question. Instead, one final message came through. And whatever you do, do not let Mr. Cole leave the scene. Marcus quietly closed his eyes for a brief moment. He already knew what was about to happen. But Officer Harris still had no idea why the entire tone of the investigation had suddenly changed. Officer Harris lowered the radio slowly, but his eyes never left Marcus. The message from dispatch kept repeating in his mind. Do not take any further action until your supervising captain arrives. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. But instead of feeling relieved, Officer Harris became even more suspicious. He looked at Marcus and asked, Who exactly are you? Marcus answered with the same calm voice he had used since the traffic stop began. My name hasn't changed, officer. That's not what I asked. Marcus gave a polite smile. I know. The deputy noticed something unusual. Marcus wasn't trying to avoid the question. He simply wasn't willing to say more than necessary. Almost as if he had spent years protecting information. The deputy stepped closer. Sir, he asked respectfully, are you allowed to tell us where you work? Marcus looked at him. I can. Then why don't you? Marcus glanced toward Officer Harris before answering. Because this situation should never depend on my job. Those words caught everyone by surprise. Even the people standing near the highway looked at each other. A woman quietly whispered, What does he mean by that? An older man beside her replied, I think he means people deserve respect before anyone knows who they are. Officer Harris folded his arms. I don't need a speech. Marcus nodded politely. And I wasn't giving one. The silence returned. It was becoming harder and harder for Officer Harris to believe Marcus was dangerous. Yet something inside him refused to admit he might have been wrong. Just then, another message came through the radio. Unit 12. Officer Harris immediately answered. Go ahead. Supervising Captain Lewis is en route. Estimated arrival. 8 minutes. Only 8 minutes. To the people watching, that didn't sound like a long time. To Officer Harris. It suddenly felt like forever. The deputy quietly checked Marcus's SUV one more time. Everything inside remained exactly the same. Nothing illegal. Nothing suspicious. His eyes stopped at the locked equipment case. It had a small silver emblem he hadn't noticed before. Not a company logo. Not a police logo. Something else. Professional. Official. He looked back at Marcus. Sir, does that case belong to you? Marcus nodded. It belongs to my team. What's inside? Marcus answered honestly. Equipment I hope we won't need today. The deputy didn't ask another question. For some reason, he believed him. Officer Harris walked toward the front of the SUV. Something wasn't making sense anymore. The driver's story matched. The vehicle registration matched. Dispatch had suddenly changed its tone. A captain was rushing to the scene. And still, Marcus hadn't asked for special treatment. He hadn't mentioned a lawyer. He hadn't raised his voice. He had only asked for his identity to be verified. Then, a distant sound broke the silence. Not one vehicle. Several. Everyone turned toward the highway. 3 black SUVs appeared over the hill, driving in perfect formation. They weren't speeding. They weren't using emergency lights. But every vehicle stayed exactly the same distance from the next, moving with quiet precision. The deputy's eyes widened. I've seen driving like that before. Officer Harris frowned. Where? The deputy didn't answer immediately. His attention stayed fixed on the approaching convoy. Then he quietly said words that sent a chill through the crowd. Those aren't ordinary drivers. They're trained protection officers. The 3 SUVs slowed together. One after another, they pulled safely onto the shoulder behind Marcus's vehicle. Every door remained closed. Nobody stepped out. Nobody spoke. The entire highway seemed to hold its breath. Marcus looked toward the convoy for only a second. Then he turned back to Officer Harris. His voice remained calm. They're earlier than I expected. Officer Harris stared at him. For the first time that morning, he wasn't asking himself who Marcus Cole was. He was asking himself, who just came to meet him. The 3 black SUVs came to a smooth stop behind Marcus's vehicle. Not a single door opened. Not a single person stepped out. Their engines continued to idle quietly, almost as if everyone inside was waiting for permission. The strange silence made the highway feel even more tense. Officer Harris looked from the convoy to Marcus. Are they with you? He asked. Marcus answered honestly. I believe they are. You believe? I haven't spoken to them. The officer narrowed his eyes. Then how do you know? Marcus gave a calm smile. Because they know where I'm supposed to be. That answer only created more questions. The younger deputy couldn't stop staring at the SUVs. Their windows were dark. No license plates marked them as police vehicles. Yet everything about them looked organized and professional. They're definitely trained, the deputy whispered. Officer Harris ignored him. Driver, he said firmly, until I know exactly what's happening, nobody is leaving this scene. Marcus nodded. I wasn't planning to. The crowd watching from the roadside grew larger. Several drivers had pulled into the nearby rest area. People quietly asked each other what was happening. One man pointed toward the convoy. I've never seen vehicles move like that. Another replied, they look like they're protecting someone important. A woman looked at Marcus standing beside his SUV. Maybe they are. Just then, the front door of the first SUV opened. A tall man in a dark business suit stepped out. He wasn't carrying a weapon in his hands. He wasn't wearing a police uniform. But the way he scanned the area showed years of professional training. He calmly looked at every vehicle, every person, every possible direction. Only after checking the surroundings did he begin walking toward Marcus. The deputy quietly swallowed. I've seen that before. Officer Harris looked at him. Seen what? Protective Advance Protocol. What does that mean? It means. The deputy paused. Whoever they're here for is extremely important. The man in the suit stopped a few feet away from Marcus. He completely ignored the crowd. He ignored the patrol cars. He looked only at Marcus. Sir, he said respectfully, are you all right? Marcus nodded once. I'm fine. We arrived as quickly as we could. I know. Officer Harris stepped between them. Hold on. The suited man turned calmly toward him. I'm Officer Harris. Who are you? The man reached into his jacket and slowly removed an identification wallet. He held it where the officer could clearly see it. I'm David Lawson. He paused for a moment. Deputy Director of the Governor's Executive Protection Division. Officer Harris looked at the identification, then back at David. His confident expression began to fade. The Governor's Executive Protection Division. That's correct. Officer Harris pointed toward Marcus. And what does that have to do with him? David looked at Marcus with quiet respect before answering. Everything. The officer frowned. I don't understand. David remained completely calm. You will. Before he could say another word, another vehicle appeared in the distance. This one wasn't part of the convoy. It was a marked police SUV. The supervising captain had finally arrived. As Captain Lewis stepped out, he didn't walk toward Officer Harris first. He walked straight toward Marcus. And the very first words out of the captain's mouth made every person standing on that highway fall silent. "Mr. Cole, I sincerely apologize for what happened this morning." Captain Lewis stopped directly in front of Marcus. For a brief moment, neither man spoke. The only sound came from the passing traffic on the highway. Everyone watching waited for someone to explain what was happening. Marcus offered a polite smile. "Good morning, Captain." Captain Lewis lowered his head slightly. "I'm truly sorry this happened, Mr. Cole." Marcus answered calmly. "I appreciate that." Officer Harris looked completely confused. "Captain," he interrupted, "do you know this man?" Captain Lewis slowly turned toward him. "Yes." "Who is he?" The captain looked at Marcus for a second before replying. "Right now, that's not the most important question." Officer Harris frowned. "Then what is?" "The decisions that were made before anyone knew who he was." Those words hit harder than Officer Harris expected. The younger deputy quietly looked down. He remembered asking several times to verify Marcus's identity before taking the situation any further. Now he understood why that had mattered so much. David Lawson stepped beside Marcus. "Sir," he asked quietly, "would you like us to continue your schedule?" Marcus shook his head. "Not yet. We've already informed the governor's office." Marcus nodded once. "Good." Officer Harris immediately looked at David. "The governor's office?" David calmly answered, "Yes." The officer's heartbeat suddenly became faster. For the first time that morning, he felt genuine doubt. Not because someone had argued with him, but because everyone arriving treated Marcus with quiet respect. Nobody questioned him. Nobody demanded explanations. They simply wanted to make sure he was safe. Captain Lewis looked toward Officer Harris. "Walk with me." The two officers stepped a short distance away from the crowd. "What information did dispatch give you?" the captain asked. Officer Harris explained everything, including the broken radio message, the suspicious report, and why he believed the stop had become high risk. Captain Lewis listened without interrupting. When Harris finished speaking, the captain asked only one question. "Did Mr. Cole resist at any point?" "No." "Did he threaten anyone?" "No." "Did he ignore your instructions?" "No." "Did he ask you to verify his identity?" Officer Harris hesitated. "Yes." The captain remained silent for several seconds. Then he quietly said, "That should have been your first priority." Back near the SUVs, Marcus stood exactly where he had been since the stop began. He wasn't angry. He wasn't celebrating. He simply waited. The younger deputy finally walked over. "Sir." Marcus looked at him. "I appreciate that you stayed calm," the deputy said. Marcus smiled. "You were asking the right questions." The deputy gave a small nod. "I just wish we'd asked them sooner." Before Marcus could answer, David's phone vibrated. He checked the screen. His expression immediately changed. He looked toward Marcus. "Sir." Marcus already knew. "They've arrived?" David nodded. "Yes." Marcus slowly turned toward the highway. Another convoy was approaching. This one was different. Larger. More secure. Every vehicle carried official state markings. Captain Lewis noticed it too. His face became serious. He quietly looked at Officer Harris. "You still don't know who Mr. Cole is." He paused as the convoy drew closer. "But in less than 2 minutes, you're going to wish this traffic stop had never happened." The second convoy moved steadily down the highway, its official state vehicles impossible to miss. Their blue and gold government seals reflected in the morning sunlight. This time, there was no doubt that these were official vehicles. Everyone standing on the roadside turned to watch. The passing traffic slowed. Even the people recording with their phones became completely silent. Officer Harris felt his stomach tighten. He looked at Captain Lewis. "Who's coming?" The captain answered quietly. "You'll know in a moment." The convoy stopped a short distance from Marcus's SUV. One by one, the doors opened. Several professional security officers stepped out first. Their movements were smooth, disciplined, and perfectly coordinated. They quickly checked the area but remained calm. There was no panic, no shouting, no rushing. It looked less like an emergency, and more like a carefully planned operation. Officer Harris whispered to the deputy, I've never seen security move like that. The deputy nodded. Neither have I, at least not this close. A distinguished older man in a dark suit stepped out of the center vehicle. The moment David Lawson saw him, he walked over immediately. The two exchanged only a few quiet words before the older man nodded. Then, without hesitation, he walked directly toward Marcus. He smiled warmly. Marcus. Marcus returned the smile. Good morning, Director. The two men shook hands like colleagues who had worked together for years. Officer Harris stared in disbelief. The older man turned toward Captain Lewis. Captain, thank you for responding so quickly. Captain Lewis nodded respectfully. Of course, sir. Officer Harris could no longer stay silent. Captain, who is this gentleman? Captain Lewis answered, Director William Grant. The director of what? The Governor's Office of Protective Operations. The words landed like a heavy weight. Officer Harris looked back at Marcus. His mind raced through everything that had happened since the traffic stop began. The calm voice. The disciplined movements. The communication earpiece. The locked equipment case. The government convoy. None of it had been a coincidence. Director Grant stood beside Marcus before finally speaking to everyone. I believe it's time to clear up the confusion. Every eye turned toward him. He looked at Marcus with obvious respect before continuing. This morning, many of you met Mr. Marcus Cole. He paused. But very few of you know what his responsibility actually is. The entire highway seemed to fall silent. Officer Harris held his breath. Director Grant reached into his jacket and removed an official government identification wallet. He opened it slowly. The state seal was clearly visible. He held it toward Captain Lewis first, then toward Officer Harris. Finally, he spoke the words that changed everything. Marcus Cole serves as the governor's security chief. Nobody spoke. Not the crowd. Not the deputies. Not even Officer Harris. Director Grant continued. He is responsible for planning, supervising, and leading the governor's executive protection team. Every major security operation passes through his office before it reaches mine. Officer Harris's face lost all color. He looked at Marcus, remembering every order he had given. Every assumption he had made. Every opportunity he had ignored. Marcus met his eyes without anger. I asked only one thing this morning, he said calmly. To verify my identity before making conclusions. Officer Harris slowly lowered his head. For the first time that day, he realized this wasn't simply a traffic stop that had gone wrong. It had become a lesson that would be remembered by everyone standing on that highway. But the biggest surprise was still waiting. Director Grant looked toward Captain Lewis and quietly said, Now, let's review the body camera footage from the very beginning. Director Grant held the body camera in his hand for a moment before passing it to Captain Lewis. Let's begin from the very first second, he said calmly. Captain Lewis nodded and opened the recording on a secure tablet. Everyone gathered around quietly. Officer Harris stood a few steps back, unable to look away. The video started. It showed Marcus pulling safely onto the shoulder the moment the police lights appeared. His hand stayed on the steering wheel. His window was already down before Officer Harris reached the driver's side. Nobody spoke while the recording played. Every instruction given by Officer Harris could be heard clearly. Every answer Marcus gave was calm and respectful. When Marcus politely asked if he could explain where his identification was, the video showed that he waited immediately after being told not to move. Captain Lewis paused the recording. He looked at Officer Harris. Did you notice anything? Officer Harris swallowed. He followed every instruction. Captain Lewis nodded. Exactly. The recording continued. Marcus never argued. He never raised his voice. He never challenged the officers. Instead, he asked the same simple request several times. Please verify my identity. Director Grant quietly folded his arms. He never asked for special treatment. Captain Lewis agreed. He only asked for standard procedure. The younger deputy lowered his head. I remember telling us to slow down. You did, the captain replied. And that advice should have been taken seriously. The video moved to the moment when dispatch requested Marcus's full name. Everyone noticed how the radio operator's voice changed the instant she heard it. Captain Lewis stopped the recording again. That was the turning point. Officer Harris nodded slowly. I should have waited. You had several opportunities, the captain answered. The facts were changing, but your decisions were not. Those words stayed in the air for several seconds. Marcus remained silent. He wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. He simply let the evidence speak for itself. Director Grant stepped toward Officer Harris. This isn't about making someone look bad. It's about making sure every citizen receives the same fairness, whether they're a governor's employee or someone you've never met. Officer Harris looked at Marcus. I understand that now. Marcus gave a small nod. I hope you remember it every day. Just then, another member of the governor's security team walked over with a tablet. Sir, he said to Director Grant, dispatch has completed the communication review. Director Grant looked at the report for only a few seconds before handing it to Captain Lewis. The captain read it carefully. His expression immediately became serious. He slowly looked at Officer Harris. The report confirms dispatch tried more than once to have Mr. Cole's identity verified before the situation escalated. Officer Harris closed his eyes for a brief moment. He finally understood that this wasn't one mistake. It was a series of missed chances to slow down, listen, and verify the facts. But one final decision still remained. Captain Lewis looked toward Director Grant and quietly asked, would you like to inform the governor's office yourself, or should I make that call? Captain Lewis looked at Director Grant for a moment before taking out his phone. I'll make the call, he said. A few minutes later, after speaking with senior officials, he returned and faced Officer Harris. The governor's office has been informed, he said calmly. An official review will begin immediately. Until that review is complete, you're being relieved of duty. The words hit harder than Officer Harris expected. Without arguing, he slowly removed his badge, his radio, and the rest of his equipment, handing them to the captain. The younger deputy stood quietly beside him, saying nothing. Marcus stepped forward. I don't want anyone judged by anger, he said. I only want every person to be treated with fairness and respect before conclusions are made. Captain Lewis nodded. That's exactly what this investigation will focus on. Officer Harris looked at Marcus with regret. I'm sorry. I should have listened. Marcus gave a small, respectful nod. We all make choices. The important thing is learning from them before someone else is harmed. As the convoy prepared to leave, everyone on the highway realized they had witnessed something far greater than a traffic stop. They had seen how patience, professionalism, and the truth could speak louder than fear ever could. The weeks that followed brought important changes. The police department completed its official investigation, reviewing every report, every radio message, and every second of body camera footage. The findings showed that the situation could have ended very differently if simple verification procedures had been followed from the beginning. Officer Harris was held accountable through department policy, and his career came to an end. Not because Marcus was an important official, but because professional standards had not been followed. Marcus never celebrated the outcome. Instead, he met with police leaders and community representatives to encourage better communication, stronger training, and fair treatment for everyone. His message was always the same. Respect should never depend on someone's appearance, job title, or the color of their skin. Every person deserves to be treated with dignity before assumptions are made. Those words stayed with everyone who heard them. Now it's your turn. What would you have done if you had been standing on that highway that morning? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful hidden identity story. And stay with us, because in our next story, one unexpected airport encounter will reveal a secret that no one saw coming.